At this time, I'd like to call the meeting for the Plaquemines Parish Council, the sole governing authority of Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District for February 10th, 2022 to order at 3 p.m. The machine is open for roll call. Let the record reflect that all members are present and that Mr. Sanders and his staff are here representing the Port Administration. This time I'd like to ask Ms. Newberry to say the prayer and Mr. Gouy to say the pledge.
Please bow your head. We take this moment to acknowledge the Almighty God and thank Him for our bountiful blessings, especially for the parish's natural resources. We pray for all those who are ill and those lost their lives to this pandemic. We pray that this pandemic comes to an end and the world moves forward to a healthy and brighter future. We pray that this government body, comprised of both council and administration, will always serve our parish with honesty, humility, equality to all. And as this government body gathers here today, we pray for the wisdom to know right from wrong and the courage to do that which is right. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Next item.
Agenda item 2, executive session, there are none. Item 3, status report by the Executive Port Director.
Mr. Sanders.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the board. I am Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District. Follows is my Executive Director's report for the reporting period of 14 January to 9 February. During this time frame, members of the port and parish staff held a Teams meeting with Phillips 66 officials regarding the possible donation by P66 of the land designated for the water booster station. P66 requested a servitude plan and an accurate property description, which are being prepared by Bud McCarty with Bryant Hammett. Once this is complete, the parish can then negotiate for the property acquisition. We continue to meet with members of DOTD regarding the container terminal and the eventual moving of Highway 23 to accommodate the container operation. These meetings are ongoing. We visited with the Port of Jacksonville to observe the LNG, the liquid natural gas bunkering of vessels by Eagle LNG Partners and Crowley Marine Logistics. In attendance were members from PPHTD, APM Terminals, DEFCO 23, Crowley Marine Logistics, and Eagle Liquid Natural Gas. Eagle LNG was already set up and was currently bunkering a Crowley Marine vessel. We reviewed their tabletop exercise to include their general operations and safety and emergency responses. Crowley and Eagle safely demonstrated the bunkering operation utilizing LNG and coached us on procedures and interaction with the United States Coast Guard, as this new fuel operation will be duplicated in some fashion at our new port terminal. I spoke with Matthew Kegg with Tallgrass to verify that were there any prospects in their commercialization efforts of the Plaquemines liquid terminal. The answer is negative. As a reminder, after December 22nd this year, Tallgrass can instruct the port to place the property up for sale, but it must be sold at fair market value. Bear in mind, the port has first right of refusal on this property. Tallgrass will get all proceeds of the sale, and we go our separate way, both of us, with no obligation. If it does not successfully sell, then Tallgrass and the port, PPHTD, may work together to lease it. All lease payments go to Tallgrass until they recover their investment plus 12%. And this is an update from last time. I was informed that the letter dated on 16 December of 21, Tallgrass canceled the third-party MOU with us and CPRA. This cancellation canceled the obligation of Tallgrass to release the property to the port in order to have the port sell it to CPRA for the diversion. This is a very poignant part, and I will arrange a Teams meeting with Tallgrass and my chairman and vice chairman at our next check-in meeting to review this. My next topic is going to be rather lengthy. I'm going to discuss the levee protection and the Point Celeste pump station. This is something that has been going on for, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 months. It was a joint effort by the parish staff, mostly John Helmers and myself, to come up with a white paper after Ida and ensure that our federal delegation had that white paper. It was the ask of Plaquemines Parish and the port of what we wanted from our delegation, knowing that the federal government was going to have a lot of aid coming down for Ida relief. We came up with 3 projects that we wanted to discuss. It was the NOV and the Point Celeste pump station. We got with the parish, and they told us what their 2 plans were. And then we also got with GNO Inc. They came out with a consolidated plan, and 2 of Plaquemines Parish's projects were on their top 10, that being the Peters Road extension and bypass and the Gulf Coast Rail realignment. In many discussions that we had with David Vitter and Mercury, we were always coming back to us that the NOV, they think that would not be a bridge too far, but the Point Celeste pump station might be. While that might not be able to be put into the United States, the Coast Guard requirements, and also with the Corps of Engineers is what would be allowable in that relief effort. The Corps of Engineers stated that the Celeste pump station was really a responsibility of the parish. That being said, I'm going to read a few things from our white paper that we gave them regarding the Point Celeste pump station and the importance of having that funded. The Point Celeste pump station is a flood protection feature in the NOV hurricane protection system approximately 50 miles south of New Orleans. The pump station was constructed by private landowners in the 40s. It's well over 50 years old. In 2012, it was turned over to the parish government to operate as part of their hurricane protection system. The impacts of the economic development. The Point Celeste pump station is the only drainage station that drains the Point Celeste boulder, which is the site of over $30 billion in planned port industrial projects in Plaquemines Parish. Venture Global has announced 2 large LNG projects and has recently begun construction on their first $8.5 billion LNG facility. The pumping station is in complete disrepair and suffered significant damages from Hurricane Ida. The parish is in the process of assessing the damages from the storm for FEMA requirements, but the repairs are needed immediately. These FEMA requirements will only cover existing capacity of the pump station, which is insufficient. When Hurricane Ida had, of the 4 pumps that are housed in the station, only 1 was operating, and it was about at 50%. Therefore, the Plaquemines Parish and the PPHTD are requesting funding for the total replacement of the pump station. We estimated it at $35 million, probably downgraded to 25 to 28. And the funds will provide the planning, permitting, and engineering design and construction of the project. John Helmers and I, when we heard that the pump station probably would not be funded by the Corps of Engineers, we were looking for every pot of money we could find. We called our state senators together, Senator Pat Connick and Sharon Hewitt. We had a meeting with them. They advised us we need to help them help us and make sure it got into the capital outlay program. We also discovered that this project was not under the wire for the capital outlay program. So we really were behind the gun in getting this done. At that point, I went and talked to our board chairman, Mr. Roussel, who knows his way a little bit around Baton Rouge. I said, we need your help. And so immediately we started attacking this problem really from the inside. With his contacts with Senator Connick, we found out the ABCs of what we had to do to hurry up and get this put into the program. It was a pretty wild, I'd say 72 to 96 hours to hurry up and get that. We were also pressing on going up to Washington, D.C. For the Mardi Gras. When we went up to Washington, D.C., we went to our delegation being led with members of Mercury. We were assisted a couple of meetings by our parish president, but he had another timetable that he had to keep. John Helmers could not go, so it was really Mercury, our chairman, and myself. We explained the three projects, the two that came from G&O Inc. and the Celeste pump station. We described our dilemma that the pump station, we have been told, is probably would not be included by the Corps of Engineers. And at this time, the Corps of Engineers had already announced that we were getting $783 million to bolster the back levy. Our ask was the money's already been appropriated. What we were really looking for is if we could take that $25 million off the top and do the pump station. The dilemma is they said they're going to bring this up to 50-year protection, but they could bring it up to 100-year protection. If you don't have a drainage in that polder, you got a single source of failure. And that's what happened. We all know what happened to our parish. If that pump station had been working, P66 would still be with us. Ironton would still be thriving. It cut our parish in half. We all know what happened. So we impressed upon them the importance of the pump station. Through various informal meetings, Chairman Roussel got a hold of CPRA, and again, what was probably going to happen, excuse me. As was told to us by Senator Kennedy, your funding is probably going to come from multiple pots of money. So we chased every pot there was. CPRA said that they could lend a hand, and we also narrowed down that if we could get some language put into the Corps of Engineers work plan, that might solve our problems. Commissioner Roussel called up folks at our local district, found out exactly what we had to do, and we started working that angle. When we returned back to Belle Chase, we immediately got a meeting with CPRA. They made good on their promise to intercede, do some blocking and tackling for us. And we got some very needed, very smartly worded letters to the governor and to our congressional staff. There are a lot of holes in my story, and I told Mr. Roussel I was going to call on him to fill in the blanks. But we're not across the victory line, but we're headed in the right direction, Mr. Roussel.
All right, thank you, Sandy. Sandy covered pretty much the scenario. The bottom line for us right now is that we're trying to get the Corps in Washington to give direction to the Corps in the district in New Orleans. The language that we came up with was complete the Point Celeste pump station. 5 words that we want to see inserted in there. The governor agreed. He wrote a letter under his signature this week supporting that effort. In our meeting with CPRA, Chip Klein was instrumental in getting the governor to write that letter upon our request. The next step is to see what comes out of Washington and what comes out of Mercury for lobbying our efforts with the congressional delegation to see if there's some way to put that in the language. As a backup, naturally, we would have to have some language put into an appropriations bill that would authorize that. In our discussions with the local district, for whatever reason, they believe that the $783 million does not cover the pump station. We disagree with their interpretation. There's nothing in the language that would prohibit it. For some reason, they have come to that conclusion. And so our goal now is to have that $25 to $30 million earmarked, so to speak, in the work plan, as Mr. Sanders stated, that the project is viable and should be included in that. If that doesn't work, the backup plan, as was stated, is the capital outlay process, which is a long process, long drawn out. I don't know if it's longer than the Corps process, but we would have to get inserted in an amendment through one of the committees into the Senate Finance Committee, Ways and Means. Those committees would have to put us in the bill, because we're not in the bill. Wasn't submitted on time, as he said, and so we're behind the 8 ball in that range. But I believe the key is, and I think Senator Vitt in our discussions agrees, that the home run hit is to get the 5 words in the authorization or the work plan that the Corps sends to the local district. So that's where we're at with it, and if you have any questions, I'm sure we can answer that.
2 other pump stations.
The 2 other pump stations that were already built. Yeah, we pointed out the fact that they've already built 2 pump stations, the one at Magnolia and the one at Wilkinson. When I talked to the head of the Corps, the civilian Corps, his answer to me was that those are in different polders, and that this did not qualify because we were not interrupting the drainage in that polder. Actually, I don't know that there's any dividing line in the polders that they're discussing. If you go down the highway, you don't see any levees that you cross between pump stations. They're all in the same polder. The only natural geographic elevations are from years ago that were not man-built to create a polder, but that's their interpretation of it. So we believe that the precedent is there, that they have built 2 pump stations. They have built the frontal protection on the Point Celeste pump station as well as the base for the new pump station. So they've already invested a significant amount of money in this station, and the tack that we take is that we just want you to complete it. We're not asking for a new pump station, just complete the one that you started, and that's where we're at on that angle. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over the last 2 or 3 months, upon request, I, along with Chris Fetters, were invited by certain residents of Ironton to provide information regarding alternatives on individual relocation for their consideration. We have been invited by individuals to households to provide this information, and at every encounter, the residents suggest that we hold a meeting for other residents to see what may be available. A group meeting was arranged this past Sunday, and I attended to monitor questions in the event the Port Rail project was discussed. We are on standby if any additional residents request the same information. And lastly, we had a meeting with the board, with some board members. The chairman did invite all of them, and we had 3 show to discuss specific details of the SP project, to include the budget, the schedule, and the vendor database. I'm now introducing Chris Fetters, who will talk to the specifics of that information. Mr. Fetters.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm trying to get this arranged. I do have a brief presentation. I made some packets that were distributed to the board members as well as to the staff before the meeting. If you can flip me over, I appreciate it. This is a follow-up to the presentation that was provided by Jimmy Screen with Volkert last month, and is specific to the responses from the meeting last week. It took us a little bit of time to put some of the information together. We appreciate the feedback and the comments. The packet that you as board members have is a bit more comprehensive here than what's in the presentation, but the material is the same. And I can make the presentation available after the meeting if that's what's desired. So obviously, per what Jimmy was talking about last month, we're in the phase 1 component. I guess it's not up yet.
Yeah, I have it up.
Do I need to do anything?
Computer on? Like, does it need to be woken up or anything?
No, it's up. Apologies. Up there. Oh, no, that's our screen.
Is that
That's me.
That's the other. That's the standby screen.
Do I need to unplug?
You're plugged in too, but there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I'll keep going while she attempts to get it up best you can. Ma'am? I can if that would.
Yeah.
William in the house.
Keep it rolling.
Let the IT guy do it. All right. Unplug that. I've got a couple of different files, bro, but it'll be the PowerPoint. So while she pulls that up, there were some specific requests that were made that would probably go a little bit beyond just the normal monthly update. These would be questions kind of getting the information caught up as more and more has been released and there's a better understanding by the board members as to, what the nature of the project is and how it's being organized and managed. The critical components were the amount of spend to date and what that went towards. It should be the last PowerPoint, Sean, bro. Yeah, that's it. You can go ahead and go to the first slide. Go to the next one. Thank you. Where the funds have gone to date and really kind of how we're going to manage the system moving forward. Obviously, under the agreement between the port and SP, there is an agreement or a series of requests and approvals that are necessary at tranches. The preliminary funding has been divided into 4 phases that are kind of commensurate with work product so that we're delivering on time and on budget to items. Then we're not really getting ahead of ourselves and spending without any kind of a catchment system. The second is what are those milestones? What does that plan look like in detail so that additional questions can be asked? And then really some of the deliverables that we've already accomplished to date as a part of that spend. One of those is the mapping system of the proposed right-of-way alignments, along with the properties that are within that right-of-way and the strategy that we're using to go about that title work and that assessment. Then the next thing is really the vendor management program. I have Mr. Vic Lafont with me today from South Louisiana Economic Council. He and his colleague Cody are going to speak to the mechanisms around that vendor management. We've asked them as a 501c3 to act as a third party to help us engage and really ensure that we're tracking and managing those vendors appropriately. And then lastly, there's some additional information regarding the budget estimates moving forward and how those spends look like. There's some components that we're going to be addressing over the next couple of weeks with the board as well as with SP. Due to the fact of the supply chain issue, there are some components of the rail, specifically some of the crossing mechanisms and components and pieces of the actual rail itself that have got a much longer lead time than what we originally anticipated. So we're developing what that strategy would look like to not change the rules of engagement necessarily with regard to the soft cost, but to go ahead and make sure that we don't interfere with that overall project deliverability due to things that are beyond our control. Next slide, please. So phase 1 of the project is really to achieve the 10% design criteria, which is what's necessary for the permit to go in and to be assessed by the regulatory bodies. There are multiple components and vendors that are associated with that, from environmental, geotechnical survey, as well as an engineer of record. Upon the January meeting, when I made the announcement that HDR was set to be our engineer of record, about 48 hours later, we were notified that HDR had to recuse themselves from the project because the Port of New Orleans had called into conflict their participation in this project. So that put a little bit of a delay that we were not anticipating. We believe that we have reconciled that, and effective probably tomorrow, I should be executing that engineer of record decision. And with all due respect to the board, I'll make that announcement afterwards so that I don't get caught in the same situation again, and hopefully remove that conflict, even though we're pretty confident in it. Beyond that, we do have the maps that I'll go through here in a minute at attachment A. Go to the next slide, please. So the project management plan, I'd asked Volkert to utilize their system, which is an eBuilder Enterprises, which automates, and we place the milestones and the deliverable packages in there. So that way, as we're monitoring the process and the project success, we are constantly balancing between the deliverable as well as the cost and spend on each aspect of it. So I've entrusted Volkert to deliver that. They've done this for almost 100 years as far as being major project management. They are very centered in the Gulf of Mexico and are very well respected in delivering these aspects to us. So what we will be moving forward with in our regular updates, you'll start to see more of a systematic delivery of that budget to actual. Go to the next slide, please. So this is a summary of the work packages that have been divided out and their assumed delivery dates based on the revised schedule due to the EOR delay. As you can see, the first two work packets, 1 and 2, are set for delivery at the end of this month. We are set and looking at a 10% design delivery no later than March 11th, which completes the phase 1 tranche of the $3.25 million that was authorized with the original contract. As we move forward, you will see there that you have work packages 3, 4, and 5, or so 3 and 4, excuse me, that will be the primary focus into March and April for the next round of funds that will be utilized on it. After we finish the 10% design, that focus really turns to the regulatory engagement. We have engaged a Washington, D.C. based law firm to help us with the Surface Transportation Board. So that is accounted for in the budget, along with the engineering requirements to reach the 30% design threshold. That then takes us into negotiations with the direct regulatory bodies. The remainder of the work packages with 5, 6, and 7, you can tell are pushed back towards the end of the year. That's as we complete the engineering design packets and we head ourselves into the construction phase. Next slide, please. You can go ahead and go to the next one. I already covered this one. Moving forward, here's a little bit more of the detail, again, that is going to come out of the e-builder. This is one of the requests of how do we know really where the money is going to go, and when do we expect to see reports and deliverables that can be reviewed and confirmed by the board as well as by SP. So I won't bore you with all of the details, but this is the primary reports, studies, plans, and design drawings that are necessary to complete the project by October of 2023. You can go to the next one, please. If you'll, Chambrel, if you'll open up, there is a PDF that says alignment drawings. Proposed alignment, MLE alignment. Yeah. And if you could take that to presentation mode, I'd appreciate it. To presentation mode so it blows up a little bit more. It should, I think it's under view, and you'll see full screen towards the bottom. Thank you. This is obviously one of the deliverables that we were prepared to provide. I did print those in 11 by 17 this time, so that way hopefully you guys can see them a little bit better. And these are individual plats that have detail. You can see from the overall scope of the proposed alignments, it's pretty narrow from the current terminus just north of Ironton, south of P66. It's really situated, again, as I've told folks, between Highway 23 and the Levy structure. Then as you head south and you start to enter the main maritime campus, there are two proposed routes that are being evaluated. One takes it behind or on the west side, if you will, of the main maritime campus. The second is the red line, which carries it down the old bed alignment all the way down into the proper to the terminal itself when it's concluded. Go to the next one, please. And again, these are in the presentation, and you all have them in 11 by 17 format. These are the individual leg plats that show a lot more of the detail, where you look at the residential or the property lines, if you will, and the potential crossings, potential issues that we may have that are being assessed. One of the components, obviously, in this first plat that we're having to deal with is the community of Ironton and what its long-term future looks like. If the community does elect to stay, we have a plan in place where you can look at that red line, which is the proposed alignment. The blue is the old line that used to run to Buras. We would push the track as far close to or as quickly to LA 23 as possible. The yellow lines that you see that are just beyond, and I apologize, I don't have a pointer, that are just kind of off the road right there, that is what we refer to as a frontage road. That's a significant piece of infrastructure to maintain the safety for the residents, since Ironton Road is a single point of ingress and egress to the community. That would continue on, if you go to the next plat, Chambrel, all the way down past Myrtle Grove. This would allow us full crossing in the event that a unit train at its maximum length as we understand it today or in its forecasted future were to stall. then anyone that resides from basically that area across from Myrtle Grove all the way up to Ironton would not be trapped. That ingress and egress would remain open. So that way, no matter what happens, folks are safe in that aspect. In this area, you can see where the old line is. Again, is that blue line. And this is an area where we have multiple proposed tracks. There is a consideration in that area to go down the levee because of the residents. That is not preferred. You have the original old blue line that goes right through that small community. That obviously is not preferred. Then you have the red line that goes along the road itself. That is our preferred pathway, again, utilizing a frontage road for that safety factor. No matter what these communities decide, if either community or residents within elect to stay and rebuild their homes post-Ida, that infrastructure will be put in place so that any person will have safe access to those properties. Go to the next one, please. And then this starts to carry down and gets into more of the industrial areas. Here you have the property that would be occupied by NOLA Oil Terminals. Discussion has already been underway to them. They do have an interest in utilization of the service track. Keep going to the next one. And again, you just keep yourself pushing forward. Now you're getting into the proposed IGP area. Next. You can just kind of toggle through them. These next few slides are pretty self-explanatory. The area is pretty narrow. Go ahead. All right, and now you're getting in. Yeah, keep going. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back a couple of slides. I'm sorry, you missed the divergence point. One more. One more. Yeah, there we go. That's where we would hook behind. So this is a lot of the detail of some of the sensitive points around if we were to go west of LA 23 here or remain on the east side. So obviously all of these positions and these different parameters are being considered through the evaluation process and the risk assessment. You can get out of that now and go back to the original presentation.
And that's on that slide before that.
Yes, sir.
The coal terminal.
Yes, sir.
It says proposed railroad option B and proposed rail option B. One's the blue line, one's the red line. Is that just a typo?
Probably so, yes, sir. Thank you for catching that. Again, these are, as I told you before, these are in draft form. These are not the permit drawings themselves, but thank you for catching that. Go ahead, Trump. Yeah, that's a good spot. So at this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Mr. LaFont and his colleague Cody to come up and talk a little bit about what Select does for us, what they're proposing. And then following that, there are slides that, again, are a part of what your presentations are, or your packets are, that have the requested information, which was the total vendor database to date, and those that have been added to the preferred list for the mainline extension project, not the terminal or anything else, just the extension as it's been vetted through today. Good.
Chris, are you done, or you need to keep?
You'll have to pull it back up if any of the board members have questions regarding the list.
No, go right ahead.
Vic LaFont with the South Louisiana Economic Council, 322 Audubon Avenue.
We can't hear you, Vic.
Okay.
Vic LaFont.
I've already lost my voice from the allergies. It appears everybody back home likes me better this way. But anyhow, again, Vic LaFont with the South Louisiana Economic Council, 322 Audubon Avenue, NSU, Thibodaux, Louisiana. The South Louisiana Economic Council is an organization that was formed, actually came out of the ashes of the economic downturn in the early 80s. I'm sure some of you remember that. And with that, we have been doing a lot of work, not just with the Bayou parishes, but our neighboring parishes as well. There's 8 regional EDOs across the state. We're one of them recognized by the State Department of Economic Development. And I work very closely with my sister agencies like GNO Inc. and BRAC up in the capital area, and of course, one Acadiana to the west of us. But we have a long history in working in vendor management. I mean, we've seen the likes of not only helping companies as we move forward, but again, if you're going to walk through my doors, you either want to start a business, you want to expand it, you want to locate there, or you want to break it into other markets. But we have a fifth button, and it's an important one for us. It's called business recovery. Whether it's man-made or natural disasters, we have to respond and help our companies. So we have a long history there. When you speak of the likes of Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, now Ida, the BP oil spill, and whatever comes next, we have that history, and we're rooted in helping particularly small and intermediate-sized businesses to move on. There's 7 good things that make a good business. If you're, your finances, your legal, your HR. If you're 5 out of 7, you're a player, okay? If you're 2 out of 7, you need some help. So one of the reasons why really Chris came to us was because of that vendor management history that we do have. We are now engaged, as our 3rd year, in what's called the Coastal Technical Assistance Center. I mean, $20 billion is going to be spent on coastal restoration projects, $20 billion between the next 20 years. Now, what's the guarantee? And we learned this through disaster recovery. What's the guarantee of our local companies participating with the prime companies? For the longest time, these big primes come in and they just take their companies, the low-hanging fruit, those that they already work with. Could be out of state, could be in state. Our job is to start at ground zero and help those companies right there. So as we acquire the system that we set up, and it's very simple. It's very, very simple. It's we're going to take your application. We're going to assess you, okay? Now, if you meet the criteria and you've got the capability, you go on that vendor list, okay? That vendor list, the prime company is going to have to work with that vendor list if it's a coastal restoration project. And so therefore, if you don't make it, we don't want to throw the fish back in the water, okay? If you don't make it, then we have the means to help you get to that 5 to 7 level. So actually the process really serves as a magnet in pulling companies in where we can triage them, put them where they can compete, and of course work with those and bring them to a level where they can compete. In our particular case, with this particular project, we're going to be highlighting, ground zero is Plaquemine. Those companies will be highlighted first as the local companies that we'll be working with. And basically, that's just a quick overview that Chris wanted me to share with y'all. We have a handout that you all have. You'll have it's bayouregion.com/LE23 for any companies interested in going there. I think we have 130 companies that's already registered, okay, pre-registered. I think 10 of those are Plaquemine companies. Okay, any questions?
Vic, the companies that have already been hired, did y'all vet those as well?
For this project?
Yes.
No, we haven't started yet. No, we haven't started.
So
When we started, what happens in the beginning, I think we started, 2 years ago? When we started first talking about this, what happens, word gets out, companies get anxious, and they call, and we have no place to send them. So we set up this website for them to go there and pre-register and to pre-apply. We have not started the process, the assessment process. Right now, we're just taking applications. If that answers the question.
Yeah, well, I was just curious because so far we've expended, a couple $1 million, and I thought that I'd ask that question if those companies that are already working have been vetted by you, but you coming in now.
So to answer your question, Mr. Russell, a lot of that money and a lot of that time was spent as we were working with these gentlemen to start to establish the database. And then as we were developing this first project, you have a couple of considerations that you have. What are the restrictions around the funding source? So what are SP's regulations regarding insurance, things of that nature? And then as we learn more and more what Vic and his team can do, as we head out of this pre-feed or pre-design phase, and we actually get into the work itself, being able to start to integrate this group in and understanding what those mechanisms are. So while they haven't necessarily vetted, we haven't had a long list of companies that we would consider to be viable at this stage in the MLE project, but more as we move forward into the advanced design and especially into the construction phase. That's where really we're going to lean on Vic's group for the mainline extension. We're also using this, obviously, as we go forward in the overall port development stage by stage. We want to begin to grow this process as we go forward. So the work that was accounted for and expended on that was done back of the house behind LA23 as we were establishing this. And we were working with Vic's group to understand what are the parameters, what kind of companies do we need to look towards, and what are the problems that we may have, small companies, large companies. And really one of the big things that we picked up on is how do we address and identify a pedigreed or historical Plaquemines company versus someone that moved in to go after the opportunity. You want to treat both of them with respect and enable growth, but you've got to really start to dig deep into what that situation is. So there was a lot of time by my team on the phone with folks as they were calling, trying to understand the project, seeing where they may fit, and then beginning to work with Vic to get this organized so that as it goes forward, it's utilized by any of the major contractors that would oversee the project components.
So as we have more of the assessment criteria, that's when we'll be able to move forward, based on where the project is.
Well, so I understand maybe that you're going to be dealing strictly with the construction, since it looks to me like the geotech, engineering, and all of that has already been selected.
That's correct, yeah. On this particular part of the project, yes, sir. Because
We're talking about the rail project, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'll continue to ask questions, but thank you, Vic.
And I'm looking forward to getting to know a little bit more of you. I swear I'm sitting down back there, and if I close my eyes, you think I'm in a port meeting in Lafourche or Terrebonne or even a parish council. We have a lot in common. We're the swamp to the west of y'all, you know. So we have a lot of waterway strengths and that kind of thing. Comfort level is with Benny because we've worked together a little bit on the legislature. Looking forward maybe to work with any of y'all.
Okay, Vic. Any questions? Comments? You have something to add?
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
And we'll continue, thank you, Vic, thank you, Cody. And we'll continue to make them available for the meetings, just like we do any other of our primary partners in this. Sean Brell, if you'll kind of just slowly kind of tab through the next one where it starts to go into the list. There you go. Yes, that's fine. So it's difficult to see there. You have it in your packets. These are the companies that we've captured to date. We spent a lot of like I said, we spent a lot of our time getting this organized on the front end of this project to see who we could, best serve, and that's how we really ended up with Vic. They started off with the website for us to help us track or to compile this list. And then as we started to look at the list and understand the different vendors that were here, we noticed the help we were going to need as we move forward in this process. Go ahead and just kind of slide through it. And this is both in the presentation and in the packet for the board, so it'll be made available. And I have discussed this with Vic. What we'll try to do is in these meetings, as I provide updates, we'll just continue to make this an attachment, so that way as it grows or changes, it is a part of public record, so that if anyone has a question, am I on the list, or am I not on the list, what do I need to do, there is some kind of public accountability so that we can make sure everything is being communicated properly. And if any of the board members have a suggestion otherwise, happy to hear it and to go through it.
I have a suggestion that rather than duplicate the list and add people to it, can you just give us the new people that are added to the list so we don't have to go through it and ferret it out?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Fair enough.
Unless
If you go to the last section.
Everyone here.
Go all the way to the last page, if you will. That's really the summary.
Save some paper.
Yeah, that one there. So, did anybody have any questions? I'm sorry about the vendor before I wrap up on the budget. I actually do have some updated slides on this. Yes, sir. Sir, Tara.
Before, we talked about the database and getting the information out
Yes, sir.
to the public. Could we use the same vehicle to get this information out? We had used websites, parish website, port website, POBI website, and we asked the local paper to also put that in the paper for people.
Yes, sir. I think you made that request to me in, was it December or January? And I immediately did that. I sent it to both POBI and to the Gazette.
That was for this?
Yes, sir. It was that website. Yes, sir. And then also the port does have it as well. And these are going to be things that we have to continue to work on and grow so that the information gets out. And as we get comments and concerns of connectivity, right? Not everyone pays attention to certain websites. So we need feedback from the public. If there are other ways that we need to do these updates, we're happy to accommodate. We've got to get the word out. This last slide, and I actually have another slide I'm going to send out post presentation to the group, and I'll make it available as well as part of the project update. This is a little bit of the forecast of spend that I believe was asked in the meeting last week. The additional detail I'll show, that blue line has got some more granularity to it, that we started to separate professional services versus construction and equipment materials. Because you'll notice beginning, I think it's in April, there's an artificial spike in there. That spike is associated with the recommendation of Volker of when we should start to order certain pieces of equipment, which is the statement I made earlier that we've got to find a way here in the next short term to go ahead and get that equipment ordered without putting a burden, because that's really a second phase capital cost. So I'm working with SP now to get them to pre-order that, those cross switches and things of that nature. They just take a longer lead time, and we don't want to impact the project. So what you'll see in the follow-up that I provide is it gives not only the gray line, which is tracking the total project budget, but it'll separate out a professional services that is commensurate with those milestones, as well as when we start to move into construction phase. Actually, Chambrel, if you'll pull it up. Yeah, there's a slide in there that I can go ahead and that way I can talk off of it.
And this
No, you have to go to a separate PDF. Thanks for driving. Yeah, so it should be one of the exhibits. They all kind of three look the same. If you'll just pull one of them off.
milestones.
Yes, ma'am. No, not that one. Try one of the other ones. That's the original.
Version 2.
Yeah. Go to version 3. So we've got this one, and then also in version 2, it shows this breakdown of detail. So you see the front-end loading, you see the overall tracking cost, and then the blue columns are the professional services, the green columns are the construction services. So you see the natural transition of the project as you switch over to the use of the funds. And we'll begin to provide this breakdown as well from a budget versus actual purpose as we go through our monthly meetings, and give you all the opportunity to take a look and keep your finger on the pulse of where things are going, along with the deliverables. And if there are no questions, that concludes my update.
The only follow-up question that I have is that in our last meeting, when we were talking about the burn rate and the expenditures, that you were going to email us a breakdown or a finer detail of what has been spent today. Have you gotten that, or?
I'm awaiting approval from SP on that. I provided that to a draft to them, and as soon as I get it, I'll send it over to you, Mr. Russell. I need to clear that with the client.
Well, let me say this. SP is represented in the audience right now?
No, sir. He was not able to attend. He will be here next month for sure.
You know, in all of our discussions, it's been told to me that, you know, SP, we write the checks to SP.
Yes, sir.
So I would expect SP to be providing us with information on the checks that we write to them in a detailed manner, to be able to know what we're writing the check to. And I appreciate you leading the charge on that, but if you're drawing money from them, you know, they ought to know what they're paying.
Yes, sir.
And they ought to be able to provide those answers to us that we had requested at the last meeting.
Yes, sir.
So, I waited for that because there's a $700,000 appropriation on the agenda today,
Okay.
which I'm not sure that I'm going to support until I get the detailed information, because when someone tells me that they're going to provide me with the information, I expect it to be provided. And when it doesn't get provided, then I lose confidence in the reporting process.
Understand, sir.
So,
And I will
you
make
know,
sure and follow up with that very quickly for you,
Today,
okay?
today I may make a move to hold that $700,000 until the next meeting.
I appreciate your position on it, and I will work expeditiously to get that over to you.
Any further
Mr. Juicy.
comments?
Yeah.
Ms. Newberry?
Excuse me, I've been in the queue for a good while now, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Richard.
Thank you.
Mr. Blink?
So, Chris, thank you so much for
Yeah.
your presentation. I really appreciate it. Can we stay on this slide, please? So the black line in here, the value of the asset, the cumulative monthly earned value.
Yes, sir.
What do you think this rail line is going to be worth 10 years after construction?
What do I think it's going to be worth?
Yeah, what do you think the rail line is going to be worth 10 years after it's built? Well more than $50 million, correct?
I would think so, yes, sir. I mean, and I have spoken to Volkert about the use of terminology here on the value part of it. They're referring to this as the project buildup, so if that was part of the question, I apologize for the confusion.
It's all good. And could you, to tie things in, can you refresh people at home, what is the parish's share, or sorry, the port's share of financing the construction of this rail line?
So there is an agreement between the port and SP to provide a base usage rate that's a calculated function, and I think that's to Mr. Roussell's point, an SP representative needs to do that in detail, and we'll have them here next month, that allows the port exclusive use of the completed asset.
So the question I'm asking is, what is what is the value, what is the amount in dollars that Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District is giving to the organizations you're involved in to construct this rail line?
I would probably defer to Shumbrell to give you accurate numbers because I don't have them in front of me, Mr. Blink. You know, I don't want to misspeak as far as the accuracy of the number, but I do recognize that the number is commensurate with the funds that are released. And correct me if I'm wrong, Shumbrell, but I believe it's somewhere around 28,000 for the first 3.25 million. I may be off on that number, Mr. Blink, if I am, but it goes in line as a fraction of as the funds are released through the process.
Benny, you're serving as the chair right now. Can you tell us over time, how much is Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District going to expend on this rail line that we will not own?
I can't tell you how much we're going to expend, but whatever SP issues and Mr. Fetter spends, that is what we're obligated to pay back, plus the interest.
No, sir. There's no interest payment.
There's no interest.
No, sir. Remember, this is being set up as a usage fee on the completed asset that allows.
Mr. Fetters, before we get into this discussion, you know, I think that we could take this at another meeting because,
Sure.
you know, you and I disagree vehemently
We do.
on you getting your money because we pay SP and they give it to you and we're not paying you directly, so you say we don't pay you.
I would agree with you on the deferment for a second meeting. Yes, sir. And I appreciate the
Because, you know, I look at it as what I've told you many times.
I know.
So, Richie, I can't answer the question, but I can tell you that there's a lot of contingency money in this $50 million. And the reason I'm asking for the breakdown of the first couple of million that's already been spent, because LA 23 gets $2.5 million for doing whatever they do. That's
Over the
development
life
fee.
of it, if we spend the full 50 million, yes, sir.
But you've already collected over $1 million.
We've collected
And
$1
we've only
million
been at
in
it for
recovery.
4
yes,
months.
sir. I'm sorry?
I'm going to leave it at that because, any other questions, Ms. Newberry?
I'm still.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Blink.
Okay. All right. Yeah, in this slide here, there is, this is property between Ironton and Myrtle Grove. There's an access road here in this slide.
You're referring to the yellow polygon feature, Mr.
Yes,
Blaine?
certainly.
Uh-huh.
So there's a frontage road or an access road there. What was the reasoning besides the residents there, of including an access road in this particular stretch versus any of the other stretches? And at the same time, overpasses couldn't be provided for the hurricane evacuation route and the main highway. How was that decision arrived at?
So as there is current use of the land, when you look at a rail piece, as we've investigated on the front end, in locations where you have residents that have a single point of ingress or egress, and they're known to be residents like communities like Ironton, where it's a number of people that may use it, or that small community across from Myrtle Grove, that allows and ensures the fact that they're not cut off. As you go down further, if there are things such as crossings in the road, then obviously we're going to have different instruments that are put in place for that. But that yellow line in particular was a result of expressed interest and concern by both the Ironton position as well as those few residents there across from Myrtle Grove.
In the Ironton community, again, that, as Sandy mentioned earlier, y'all are having discussions to buy those folks out?
No, sir. No, let me be clear about that, and I'm glad you brought it up. And again, when we took a look at the overall alignment potential, you have to look at your different areas, and that's why those plats are broken up the way they are. With Ironton, we proposed to put in the frontage road from the beginning of this, making the assumption that they were going to rebuild post-Ida, right? Because we had started this pre-Ida. We began to receive inquiries that, if there were ways for us to help out, could we do that? Some of the groups that I work with in many parts of my project have reached out and expressed interest that they would be open to helping the residents of Ironton relocate if they chose to. So upon invitation, we went and presented what those alternatives look like. So it's not the buyout in the dirty sense of the word. It's an opportunity that one way or another for the overall project development, there's a deployment of capital, and we want to see it utilized the best way.
Okay. Can you please help me understand how 45 residents would require an access road, but a community of 2,500 to 3,000 people and existing industries wouldn't require a railroad flyover? Help me understand, please.
I'm not sure I have discerned between the two.
Because it doesn't make any sense at all. We're stuck, right? The southern districts are going to be stuck behind a rail crossing, potential crossing. There's no plans in this chart at all to have any sort of railroad flyover. But 45 residents in Ironton and Myrtle Grove would receive an access road that would affront some properties there.
Actually, the solution for the southern part of the parish is the relocation of LA 23. The sequence of this, which is not included in the current design of the main line, because our preferred right-of-way is to keep the track on the east side until that solution has been completed.
We're always on the bad end of things. We want more than just it's going to happen at some undetermined point in the future. And we want the southern residents of this parish and industries, existing businesses, et cetera, want the same courtesy afforded to us as Ironton is getting. There's an access road to get around a unit train. What's going to happen when somebody's having a heart attack in an ambulance? We're trying to evacuate for a hurricane, and somebody's trying to get containers out kind of slowly. We're going to be stuck down there. We're going to drown like rats. And that's not what your plan isn't accounting for those types of things.
If you notice, though, that the plan that you have in front of you stops well short of the overall terminal because that solution itself has not yet been finalized. So we don't want to impose a crossing at this point in time until that final situation has been fully evaluated.
So I feel like it is somewhat disingenuous to put this map for this sign here for informational purposes only here at the very end. There's existing businesses there that are doing quite well, and that could have absolutely been put up here. I feel like information is being hidden from this council or given to us at some later date when it's too late to turn back or make decisions that would guide this process in a way that would actually benefit residents and make it easier for us to live.
Absolutely. I have to disagree with you in the sense that we haven't made any decisions. That's the point of these conversations now, is to understand and express those interests.
Got it. And Benny, again, the money pushed over to this organization has been how much so far?
$2.5 million or so.
But no decisions have been made.
On that particular piece because of the influences that we're talking about. So the final decisions on those properties, as far as on the southern piece, are also influenced heavily by the final alignment of LA 23 as the overall terminal comes online, which is a separate project.
It really is a railroad to nowhere then.
No, absolutely not.
Figured out the crown jewel, the whole thing, the container terminal, where everything is going to end up. Why isn't that further along? Why aren't we seeing that here? It just doesn't feel.
That can be provided in a terminal update. This was a mainline extension update.
I yield. Thank you.
While we were on the subject of the bypass road, looking at this map, it doesn't make much sense to me to put the bypass road where you put a bypass road for the Ironton residents to get out, because you still got to come across the track in two locations. So what is the purpose?
The purpose is that in the event that a unit train were to stall somewhere in that area, the length of the bypass road would not, one end or the other would be open. So that way anyone that is east of the track would not be trapped. That's why there's the 2 points of entry and exit. And if you look at the overall length, it is longer than that of a unit train from the 2 points of crossing.
Can you tell us who owns the land adjacent to that, between Myrtle Grove and Ironton? Who owns that land?
There are, well, the primary owner, I believe, is the Pivac family. And then there's a couple of other ownerships in there.
Have there been negotiations with them? Or have they refused to let you cross their land with a railroad track unless you provided an access road?
No. We haven't gotten to that point of the discussion. That's what's going right now with the different landowners. We've been working that through as we can make appointments and be able to discuss with those folks. We had to do the full title work, understand who the actual ownership was. That took a tremendous amount of effort and time. And then you have to start to schedule and work through that process.
But this option hasn't been provided to other adjacent landowners on this rail track, right?
What other adjacent landowners would you be referring to?
The coal terminal, any other, the port itself owns land down there.
Mm-hmm.
There's no access road anywhere else except for right there in that stretch.
But the crossings typically associated with industrial or business activities are managed differently than those for residents.
Got it. So the entirety of everything below where you're going to cross LA 23 at some point in time does not fall into that category. Is it not an industrial area with residents that are south of where you're going to cross our 4-lane highway with your rail track?
The crossing for LA 23 has to be evaluated commensurate with the LA 23 relocation.
What does that even mean?
So when the original master plan was published, there was this big extensive potential to move LA 23 all the way to the western part of the south campus, right? And then hook back in just directly north of West Point of LaHash. As that part of the project on the terminal has advanced past its pre-feed, what we found is that the need for the relocation of the western push of LA 23 is much less. So you have a number of considerations that you have to go through. Our objective is to keep the rail track east of the highway so that there is no crossing. And then that way the grade separations or any crossings that would be there would not impair traffic to the south of the campus.
And as you understand the elevation of the property, you would be relocating LA 23 to the absolute lowest place, correct?
No, sir, it would not be that far west.
Chris, I've seen these layouts. It's against the back levee. It's the lowest place around. It's going to be inaccessible for another month and a half after a storm.
That was in the original master plan, Mr. Blank. What I'm trying to tell you is that in the updated plan that was provided by Nigel Nixon and partners, as well as some of our pre-feed analysis, it doesn't go that far west. In fact, it only moves, I think it's about 300 yards west as opposed to going a full 1,700 yards.
What's the timeline for moving LA 23?
It's about a 3.5 to 4 year window, which is commensurate with how long the container terminal access and growth would then require that tie-in. So it's a matter of managing these projects in a sequence that you have the least amount of impairment to the residents north or south of it. Residents, water, land use, whatever it may be.
So for potentially 4 years at best, the residents and businesses of Southern Plaquemines Parish will have to wait on a train.
No, sir, that's not what I said. No, what I said is that the final rail alignment and the tie-in to the container terminal is to be commensurate with that of the relocated LA 23. So therefore, they would not be cut off with a crossing. These things take time in years, not in months. And so we've run that schedule out so that the use of the container terminal now does not require as much heavy rail in its first infancy phase. So that afforded us the time to go ahead and pursue the relocation of LA 23 so that they would not have to have a crossing on the main maritime campus.
Completed, Mr. Blank?
Yeah, I just want more than platitudes, though. I'd like to see some infrastructure that other communities are going to receive. Other communities are going to receive a workaround. They'll be able to get around if a train is coming. My community is not going to be getting that, at least right away.
Sandy, you have the updated design drawings? Sandy? You have the update, no, not with you, but I know that you have the updated design drawings. It's as quick for you to provide them to Mr. Blink that shows how when the rail connects in and what that schedule timeline looks like, you have the infrastructure that you're asking for so that you're not imposed upon.
Well, if you had that information, why didn't you provide that to us today so we wouldn't have to get stuck on this?
Because that's a part of the terminal update, Mr. Roussel. That was not a part of the mainline rail because that really attributes itself to the intermodal transfer facility that's associated with the terminal. That's what drives that final leg of this piece.
But my point is information that is piecemealed and fed to us leads to these lengthy discussions because of the lack of knowledge. So I'm going to leave it at that. Ms. Newberry, you have the floor. Do you want it?
I have one question. So with inflation today, construction, manufacturing, you've been implying that this is a $50 million project. Do you see this going beyond that?
Our desire is no. That's part of the reason for the early ordering of some of this equipment is to avoid that, right? The expensive equipment you don't want to see and let time and inflation gather on. Also, to a point Mr. Roussel made earlier, there is a contingency built into that $50 million that would absorb those things if in the event inflation were to, go beyond what our projected rate would be. So we are sensitive to it as the project has been made aware, And that's why we are working with SP to develop an alternative plan to get at least that expensive or those high dollar pieces that may really strongly influence the total value of the project ordered as soon as possible, so we can avoid that.
On the other hand, the rail may go down. Steel, with the tariffs being lifted, steel may go down. So, you might be ordering them at the wrong time. But anyway, having said that,
It is a risk, yes, sir.
let me ask you this. These maps seems like I've seen these before on the diversion project. Were these maps taken from the diversion project?
No, sir.
They weren't?
No, sir. No, those are our maps.
How come the copy I picked up in Oakville the other day had the diversion maps on them? Said it.
I'm sorry, the diversion maps, as far as like the diversion itself
No.
being located on it?
In the category down at the bottom, they had a square in there that said the diversion.
Yeah, so when we built our entire mapping process, the polygons that were included in the CAD drawings also had to account for the proposed location of the diversion.
So,
So the legend may have not been struck. That was an interim document. That's why I expressed to you that issuing drafts is a dangerous point.
I saw we spent over $250,000 on maps. I would have thought that would have been taken out early on if we're going to use their maps and overlay this design.
We're not using their maps. I can't use their maps. We have to generate our own.
Well, I'll be glad to show you what you used.
Okay. We can, again, happy to come meet with you again next week and go through all these details.
We have a Monday morning meeting. If you want to come to the Monday morning meeting, we'll be glad to do that.
Love to.
And I will show you exactly what I'm talking about.
Love to. Appreciate the invitation.
Any further comments or questions on this item? You have any more on your presentation?
No, sir, I don't.
Sandy, you want to, Mr. Henry?
Hold on, Mr.
Oh, you in the queue? I'm sorry, Carlton. I'm still there.
Mr. Feathers, how far west you said that Highway 23 is going to be in that area?
We're
How many yards you said?
about 300 yards west of its current alignment, so a little bit less than probably a quarter of a mile. It may stretch a little bit more than that, Mr. LaFrance. I don't have the map in front of me for the exact scale, but it definitely doesn't go the full, 3/4 of a mile back along the western protection levee that the original plan had called for.
But when you get to the Venture Global property, where do you go?
So on the maps, that's why there's the divergence, and this is part of the discussion you and I have been having, that originally the plan was to go back behind it. After these engineers, this planning group has come forward and really expressed what we're doing. The recommendation is to look at staying along Highway 23 as best as possible. And to the observation and request you made in our meeting last week, I know Sandy has reached out to the representatives at Venture so that we can make sure we get caught up on that information, and we present them with the options that we have and make sure we get their feedback on their permitted and planned designs. And again, that is a data point, much to the point like Mr. Blink is bringing in, that as we work ourselves down the track, those iterations have to take place as that information becomes more conclusive.
So there's a lot of tweaking got to be done to these maps that you gave us.
Yes, sir, there will be tweaking done to the maps as the engineers do, but the overall assemblage of the maps, as far as the properties that go, the key attributes go, that's where the base build-up went, along with the title work. And then as we get into those finer points, those sensitive areas, there will be changes to those maps. Yes, sir.
What happens if Venture Global comes and says they don't want it around them?
Doesn't want it around them? In what phrase, Mr. Koknovich?
On the back anywhere. Don't want it crossing the property they renting from us.
That will be a lengthy discussion that involves, because it is a railroad project, and we will have to work through that. In my experience with this, there's always a way to reach some form of a compromise, and you just have to work through the system.
And if they have to redo their FERC permit, how long that could take?
So in typical forms of primacy with the permits, once their permit has been approved or it's that far down the maturation line, then we typically have to account for any changes that would not or would minimally impact what their design processes are that have been permitted. That's just the way of primacy as far as the permits go. You have to fall in line with the existing infrastructure.
Or any design changes that they would make on crossings to export their LNG, you would have to pay for?
We would have to come to some form of an agreement. I'm not saying we would have to pay for it. We would have to see what those changes are. As you can appreciate, that's a pretty broad statement. I mean, we would have to see exactly what that is, if it is significant or not significant, because the reach, it just depends on where those reaches are. We need to have those lengthy discussions with them and reach that conclusive piece. Those are those details that you reach into the 30% design.
Well, I would have hoped, and I've made this comment many times already, that before we get down spending to the $3 to $4 million level that we're already at, that we'd at least had some conversation with them. And we haven't had that.
Understood.
I don't know if it is. Any further comments on this item?
I'll say something, Mr. Roussel.
Mr. LaFrance?
When it's going to come down to dealing with Venture Global, you're talking about a $8.5 billion project compared to a $50 million project.
Mm-hmm.
I think you know what side we're going to stand on.
I can understand where your position is, yes, sir. We're sensitive to that.
Okay.
Any further comments? If not, I'll expect to see the breakdown on the expenditures to date that we had discussed and we were told we were going to get. Sandy, you have anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Henry, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
They do, Colonel. Well, I got to ask it to you guys. Well, listen, on the tall grass deal, do that, whether or not you lease it or you buy it, do that 50-yard boundary still exist for the graveyard was?
Could you restate your question, please?
On the tall grass deal, whether it's leased or somebody purchased it, do that 50-yard boundary still exist? That tall grass initiated.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And one more. What happened to the research project that was tall grass was doing with UNO at that site? What happens there?
If you're talking about a research project?
Yeah, UNO was doing, remember?
They got the artifacts.
The artifacts?
Yeah.
I think that's another reason that Tallgrass said that this project might not work. Yeah. The commercialization process and those artifacts.
But are UNO still involved in it, or?
They hold the artifacts for us.
Okay.
Right, as far as the artifacts are, yeah, but we would not be touching that part of the property.
All right.
Yeah.
Any further comments? Yes, sir.
Benny,
Yes.
yes, during your time as parish president, it seemed things were somewhat gelled up with the outfall channel of the mid-Barataria sediment diversion at that time, and some pits were dug to borrow clay from the area on a previous alignment of the mid-Barataria sediment diversion. Do you remember all that?
Yes, I do.
Got it. And Sandy, now, of course, you know, we're having trouble developing that property commercially because mid-Barataria sediment diversion is going to cross through it, and there's some cemeteries in that area. Do you think that CPRA purposely shifted the alignment of that diversion to where they wouldn't have to deal with that problem and this port would?
I can't speak for that, Mr. Blank.
Well, back then it was called the Mid-Barataria Freshwater Diversion. It wasn't sediment. So let's get that straight.
Well, I think that we're ready to have a head logger over this issue from what you had read earlier in the meeting.
Yes, sir.
PLT and
I think that's a pretty interesting item that we brought up and it's something to delve into on Monday.
okay. Yes, sir. State your name for the record, please.
My name is Cornell Battle. I lived at 140 Johnson Street in Arlington. Okay. I've been hit by 3 storms, lost 3 homes, and I decided to leave because, I mean, I'm just tired of it. Mr. Sanders or whoever can't run me out of Arlington. You understand? I'm leaving because, again, the 3 storms I've been hit by, I mean, I'm tired of it. The water coming from Murder Grove, then hit ConocoPhillips, it's just overbearing. So I decided to build in Slidell, you know, just leave Arlington, you know, altogether. So I mean, no company here is trying to run the people out of Arlington. You know, they're just giving them an option. You know, if you want to stay, you know, stay. I mean, you know, the rail is still going to run, you know, but it's not going to be, you know, right on top of you. You know, so I mean, you know, that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments? Sandy, you completed, or you have anything else?
No, sir, that's complete.
All right, move to the next item, please.
Item 3A, financial report budget to actual.
Good afternoon. All port commissioners have been provided a 2021 total budget report and detailed budget report with actual expenditures shown as of December 31st, 2021. I would like to make note that these figures are not final. These figures are unaudited, and the budget figures that are presented here are based on amendments that have not yet been voted on. I will post this presentation to the port's website. I'll make sure that I make note to let the public know that these budgeted figures does include proposed budget amendments. There will be changes. This is subject to change based on that amendment and its vote and any changes made to that.
Any questions on the financial report? Yeah. Ms. Newberry, you want to get in the queue?
How you doing, Shimbrell?
Okay.
So to make sure I'm correct, please correct me if I'm wrong. So on the front page of the financial report, so we expected for last year for our grants to be $991,000.
I was going to go through some notes on them on the presentation.
Okay, so you.
I'll go through these tables quickly, and I have a few comments on each one.
We'll go ahead and I'll.
Yes. Okay. So this first slide is the total budget. It shows a total revenue of $10,617,745. As of 12/31, as of today, we have collected $10,385,850, which leaves about 2% of revenues uncollected. Our total personal services, as you can see, that came in. I won't read out all the numbers. I can go over the percentages if we need to go into more detailed or drill down. I have those details provided as well. But total personal services is projected at about 4% under budget. Total financial services are currently 31% under budget. Total operating services currently at 21% under budget. Capital outlay at 33% under budget. Next slide is our revenue by subcategory. This goes a little bit more into detail as to Ms. Newberry just asked regarding the grant revenue and tariff revenues. It breaks it down by interest revenues, rents and leases, and miscellaneous revenues as well. A couple of highlights. Our tariff revenues are about 7% above our projected budget for 2021. They are also up about 12% from 2020 2020 collected tariff revenues. Our overall total revenues, 2% below budget, mostly was due to our WRDA grant revenue. We have a large amount of that has not been sent over to me from PPG for reimbursement and earnings. I'm unclear. I have requested that information when it comes to the grant revenue. I left after the amendment, there was probably about $500,000 left in that budget because I think I only had expenses up to about June. So we do have some reimbursements and expenses out there that needs to be earned in the grant revenue category. This is a bar graph based on the budget, the revenue budget. I mentioned that our tariff revenues compared to 2020 came in this year about 11.6, 12% above what we collected in 2020. This is a breakdown of our expenses by subcategory. I'll go through them quickly as far as the percentage remaining and then give a couple of highlights based on these figures. Our personal services budget came in 4% below budget. Financial services, 31% below budget. Operating and services supplies, 8% below budget. Communications, 8% below budget. Rents and leases, 13% below budget. Maintenance, 42% below budget. Legal support, 6% below budget. Professional consulting and technical services, 31% below budget. Materials, parts, and supplies, we were about 1% over budget in that category. Employee expenses, we were about 60% below budget in that category. And other charges, we were about 41% over budgeted in that category. Personal services, like as I mentioned, is 4% below budget. Financial services came in at 31% below budget, and that's due to some year-end non-cash items. And we also have not received our fourth quarter interagency fee. Those are unrecorded. So that 31% variance shall decrease. Overall total operating expenses, overall, they were 21% below budget, 13% under budget in the rents and leases, 42% under budget in our maintenance. And we were also 31% under budget in our professional consulting services and employee expenses. That was a graph on the expenses. And that concludes my presentation. As I stated, it will be put up on the port's website, and it will be updated depending on those amendments and changes. If you, subject to any questions, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions? Any questions anywhere? Questions? We'll move to the next item. Thank you for your report.
Item 4, bids and advertisements, there are none. Item 5, introductions, there are none. Item 6A1, an ordinance establishing ferry toll rates and providing for discounts and exemptions thereof, establishing ferry hours of operation, adopting policies and procedures for ferry operations, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Commissioner Bartholomew.
Question is, are we ready to move in that, General Sanders? Or we want to defer it to next week?
No, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Bartholomew.
Need to offer for discussion.
Yes.
Well, I would offer it if we have a discussion. Well, I'll offer for discussion. Go ahead.
And
I'll
I'll
second.
second by Mr. Konovich. Okay. Let me put some clarification in here. In the ordinance transfer, the authority given to transfer that, the council has to do that as far as setting the tolls, schedules, and so forth. So it would be improper for us to do it underneath the port, because the authority lies with the council to be able to do that. So, John, Mr. Bartholomew, I would recommend that you withdraw this one.
Okay, but I'm still waiting on some information before we can act on it at the council meeting anyway.
Okay.
I'm depending on the port to provide to go ahead when they're ready to doing the research that they have requested to do. So when they get ready for that, I will report to the council meeting, but we'll withdraw this today from the port hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Bartholomew. And reintroduce it under the council, please,
Yes.
when you get it together. Thank you. Item 6A1 will be withdrawn then, correct? Okay. Steve?
6A2, an ordinance authorizing Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of the Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District, to purchase land owned by Brian and Vanessa Fisher and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Commissioner Roussel.
I'll offer next for a second.
Second.
Second by Councilman Konovich. This is a piano key, and if you would like to elaborate on it, so be it, but we've already gotten an appraisal. We've got a legal opinion that says that the appraisal and the sale price is legal. So, any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
I'm anticipating Mr. Henry question, how much money?
400,000.
Just for Mr. Henry's sake.
Mr. Henry, so you don't have to get up, it's 400,000. All right.
Good.
Good?
Yes, sir.
Any further comments or questions? If none, the machine is open. And the ordinance is adopted 9-0. Move to item B.
Item 6B, an ordinance to amend the Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District's 2022 revenue and operating expenditure budget and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Commissioner Blank, and this is offered with substitute. So under section...
Have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember LaFrance.
Under section 1, on the line where it says revenues, strike out 468.257 and put in 468.258. And then under rents and leases, VG parcel 3, strike out the $7,322,000 and put in $6,979,934. Under section 2, strike out $1,695,198 and put in $1,206,613. Under 445, 490, they added line 2460, Gen operating 536.105, fire, wind, collision, an increase of 751,424. Under the second 490 PPHTD, they added 246 rescue boats, 536.105, insurance, fire, wind, collision, a decrease by 400,000. Under 491 for ferries, they added 246, under 2463 ferries, 516.105, retirement PERS, a decrease of 40,000. Then they struck out the deductible ferries for 750,000, and they added deductible ferries for 150,000 increase, and they also added the insurance, fire, wind, and collision, a decrease of 200,000, and that is it.
I'd like to delete line 34, please.
All right, 4 also. All right, so it's offered with those changes, Mr. Blink?
What is line 34?
Let me ask you this, the substitute, when you say it was a substitute, he was offering it with changes originally?
No, it was offered, and then Chambrell had amendments, and it was so many, we made it a substitute.
So it was a substitute offered? All right, so we have a substitute on the table, and Mr. Blink wants to offer that substitute with line 34 deleted? You want to divide the question?
Yes,
I don't think that's.
Well, Mr. Blink wants to make an amendment to reduce the 717,000 line 34. That is the rail usage fee that I had mentioned earlier, that I was going to ask that we defer that vote on this item until we get the breakdown, the detail that we were asking for. I believe that if we don't delete it, what will happen is we won't have anything to come back to have leverage on getting the details. That's my personal opinion. So you want to make an amendment to the substitute, Mr. Blink, and I'll second the amendment. So the amendment is on the table. Any comments or discussion on the amendment?
On the full,
No, just the amendment on line 34, deleting that line until we can come back to it at another meeting. Any comments or discussion on the item, on the amendment on the substitute motion? Hearing none?
yeah, I do.
Oh, go ahead, Ms.
I'd like
Newberry.
to hear the administration's point of view of that.
I think it was already discussed that Mr. Roussel said he wanted to see it, and Mr. Fetters agreed.
Okay, so we're going to get an introduction for next council meeting, for next port meeting?
Yes, we'll have an introduction prepared to
Right.
introduce at the next
And-
meeting. My goal here is to open in the transparency of this expenditure of $50 million. I think Sandy and I have discussed this. Mr. Fetters knows my position, and I expressed it publicly earlier, and that's where I'm at. You know, whether the board wants to know where the money's going, I don't know, but I do. So that's why I offered that amendment for that leverage. Can't get any clearer.
And Mr. Fetters said, okay, he appreciated it.
So, Mr. Blinks offers the amendment, I second it, and the machine is open on the amendment if there's no further discussion. There are 2 noes, Councilmember Black, Councilman Arborough, and the amendment passes 7-2. We offer the substitute as amended. Any comments or discussion?
Yeah, I do. I have a question.
Yes.
So on this change, line 18, you change in the amount. So VG parcel 3, is that because of our error, or is that, what is the amount in the lease that we agreed to from 7,322 to 6,000, I'm sorry, 7 million to right below?
No, that was an error on my part because I put it in as a full year, but the rent was prorated based on the execution date of the lease for parcel 3.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the item? Hearing none, machine is open. And on The ordinance is adopted 8-1 with Mr. Black voting no. Next item, please.
Item 6C, a resolution authorizing Menard J. Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of the Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District, to execute an agreement with eValve IQ LLC and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Commissioner Rousseau.
I'll offer next for a second.
Second.
Second by Councilman Konovich. This is an item that was evaluated and recommended by the administration. Any comments or discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Blink.
Can you or the administration please explain the details of this, looks like $56,000 expense?
Ports have been elevated to a very high likely terrorist target lately because we have witnessed how COVID has disrupted the global supply chains, and ports and transportation systems have demonstrated their fragility throughout this pandemic. So the Coast Guard is looking for, at all ports, and will be testing their cyber resiliency, so to speak. So this project is covered by a FEMA Port Security Grant Program. It has a 25% match, so the port's cost is $14,125. And the best way to describe this scope of work would be an audit of the port's cybersecurity resiliency from an independent qualified third party to assess the current cyber posture of the PPHTD network. And also items that will be looked at in this project are security policy and organizational review, physical environmental security assessments, incident response plan review, and penetration testing. So all ports are going to start going through this type of audit. It's very important. Like I said, our transportation systems in the United States are very likely high target areas for terrorists.
Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, machine's open. And the resolution is adopted 8-1. Councilman Blake voting no. Next item, please.
Item 6D, an ordinance establishing the policy for Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District in regard to mandatory terms to be included in all port contracts for professional and other services and all contracts that extend beyond a single fiscal year, establishing the policy for Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District in regards to submitting all signed contracts to the Council Secretary within 2 weeks of the document being executed, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Commissioner Rousseau.
I'll offer next for a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. France. Any comments or discussion? Brief explanation is that this is a policy that is being set because of non-appropriation and convenience clauses. We've had this discussion with Chambrel, State Legislative Auditor, and we want to make sure that the contracts that are issued have this language in them. And I also have this item on the council agenda as well. No questions or comments? I'll ask for, machine is open. And the ordinance is adopted 9-0. Move to item I-E.
6E, a resolution authorizing Menard J. Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of the Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District, to execute a reimbursement agreement with LADOTD and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Commissioner Rousseau.
So offered. Ask for a second. Second by Councilman Gouy. This has to do with the agreement for the water line with the...
Yes, sir. This is the water booster station. We applied for and were awarded a port priority program on this. The cost is $6 million, where the port pays it up front, and then we get reimbursed 90%. So these documents that we're signing off, one of the proper procedures required by our DOTD to perform that task.
Thank you. Any final comments, questions? Hearing none, machine is open. Resolution adopted 9-0. PLT update, you've already heard, and I'm going to defer C because of the COVID issues. Move to item 8.
Item 8, approval of the January 13th, 2022 regular meeting minutes.
I have a motion. Ms. Newberry moves the approval of the January 13th, 2022 meeting minutes, and I'll second. Any comments or discussion on the minutes? Adoption of the minutes. Hearing none. Machine is open.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Machine is open. Offered by Council LaFrance, seconded by Gouy, and the machine is open on adjournment. And the meeting is adjourned at 4:35. Thank you all for coming.